FreedomToons.
I'm a brilliant intellectual.
As am I.
The two of us are sick and tired of dealing with troglodytes and have moved into a bomb shelter so we don't catch the stupid.
To stay sharp, we spend our days pursuing the pastime of true intellectuals, debunking YouTube videos.
We are the Debunkers.
I don't believe that using your pronouns is going to do you any good in the long run.
This is the far-right's new philosopher superstar.
Yes, because anyone who isn't to the left of BuzzFeed is far right.
This isn't BuzzFeed, it's Mike.
Same difference.
And when he thinks of the plight of men in America, it brings him to tears.
Every time the topic comes up, it breaks me up because it's so damn sad.
Yes, something tells me this was out of context. Let's roll the actual clip, shall we?
This show, we've covered widely the fact that suicide is the biggest killer of young men under the age of 45 in this country. It goes on in that interview to say, at this point, to my astonishment, Peterson begins to weep.
Yeah, well, it's this, see, now it did it to me again.
Yeah, so he started to tear up in a discussion of issues such as male suicide. And you poke fun at him for crying. I can't even think of a joke for that one. That's just terrible. Seriously horrible. Wow. I mean, that's low even for left-wing clickbait.
Look, last night, I was at this talk I gave, and about 1,000 people came, and about 500 of them stayed afterwards, and most of them were young men, and just one of them after the other comes up to me, and they shake my hand, and they say, look, I've been listening to what you've been saying for 6 months, and it's changed my life. It's like I was depressed, I was addicted to drugs, my relationships weren't working out, I was hopeless, I didn't have any goal. I started cleaning up my room and telling the truth and working hard on myself, and it's really working, and I just want to thank you for helping me. And I think, God, it's so sad.
Young men suffering from drug addiction and depression and suicidality. LOL, male tears, bazinga. So edgy, Mike.
He says that white privilege doesn't exist,
I think the idea of white privilege is absolutely reprehensible.
that women in gender studies courses should be defunded.
Why the hell are we subsidizing revolution? It's crazy, and it's dangerous.
He believes women in gender studies departments should be defunded due to the ample amount of provable pseudoscience and the dreadfully useless, biased, and flat-out untrue doctrines being propagated by them.
Don't you know? If we don't funnel tax money into gender studies departments, women stop having rights.
And that it's better for trans people if we don't use the pronouns that they prefer.
Actually, he said he may be willing to use other people's pronouns, but that he shouldn't be forced by law to do so. In Canada, Bill C-16 was passed, which forces people to use pronouns against their will, thus violating their freedom of speech.
Yes, not only that, but this is the first time a hate speech law,
Which I hope we can all agree is a terrible, terrible thing.
compels someone to say words rather than restricting their use. Naturally, he opposes this law.
And furthermore, Bill C-16 enshrines in law an absolutist social constructionist view of gender, which asserts that gender identity, biological sex, and sexual orientations all operate separately from one another, despite the fact that there's literally zero empirical evidence to suggest that this is the case, and the only argument being made for it are coming from gender studies programs which operate entirely on highfalutin hypotheticals rather than facts or evidence. Interesting how you failed to mention any of that. Real hard-hitting journalism from Mike.
Yes, which leaves me with the question, why didn't Mike mention Bill C-16? It's the source of the entire controversy which propelled Peterson into the limelight. Perhaps it's because Mike doesn't want to have to defend legislation which can only exist in a country without true freedom of speech?
Or worse, I fear. Perhaps because Mike doesn't want to criticize legislation which can only exist in a country without true freedom of speech.
His name is Jordan Peterson, and his influence is gaining rapidly. His latest book was at the top of the Amazon bestseller list, and his YouTube channel has 700,000 subscribers. But according to him and conservative writers across the country, no one knows what he stands for.
Yes, well, given that we've demonstrated you've either misunderstood or misrepresented every single thing you've mentioned him saying or doing before you've even had a chance to introduce him by name, I think it's clear to see why that's the case.
Okay, so what does Jordan Peterson believe?
I'm sure you're going to give us an unbiased look into the views of the man you've just provably misrepresented and removed from context several times.
For that, let's take a look at his new book called 12 Rules for Life. The book lays out simple rules for personal accountability. Stand up straight, tell the truth, be precise in your speech. It's pretty basic self-help stuff, a lot of which is about how to get girls.
Oh no! Helping young men improve their ability to communicate with women? How dreadfully cis-heteronormative.
But then, underneath all that, are his politics. Peterson, who's usually pretty lucid, believes in a paranoid conspiracy popular on the far right.
Once again, the far right being literally anyone right of left.
He believes our cultural institutions are run by a cabal of radical Marxists who want to destroy Western civilization.
Given that he rose to prominence combating legislation which operates on Foucauldian Marxist interpretations of gender roles absent any supporting scientific data, it's kind of obvious why he would assert said Marxist theories have undue power in the upper echelons of academia and government.
But let's not sully this with logic now.
Yes, and I find it quite entertaining that Jordan Peterson's being labeled a conspiracy theorist by someone who seems to believe there's some kind of secret alt-right double meaning encoded into everything the man says.
Take Peterson's belief about women in gender studies departments at universities. Those departments don't really want women's equality in our society and in the workplace. No. They want to destroy the Western world intentionally as part of a Marxist revenge plot.
Once again, he's never said any of that. He has, however, asserted, to put it one way, that gender equality is not contingent upon women and men being identical, which is the prevailing view in gender studies departments, and that this misguided belief can have seriously negative ramifications for society if taken seriously. You know, such as legislating the use of certain gender pronouns against the will of the public.
Yes, but what kind of a conspiracy theorist would ever even suggest that that could ever be the case?
One thing he's obsessed with, for example, is lobsters. As in, lobsters have gender hierarchy, and you wouldn't say that lobsters oppress their women, would you?
Gotta love the word obsessed. Great way to paint someone in a negative light based on subjective emotion alone.
Yes, and once again, not at all what he said.
Yes, he's simply mentioned that lobsters and humans have neurological similarities due to the fact that we have a common ancestor. And while humans and lobsters split apart untold millions of years ago in our evolutionary development, we still share some similar traits, which would suggest that these traits have existed within our biology for millions of years, and therefore it would be foolish to claim these characteristics are socially constructed human inventions.
That's one of the things that made him so popular among, young right-wing reactionaries.
Once again, right-wing reactionaries being anyone.
Is that he's advocating for these really fixed ideas of gender that line up with their anxieties about masculinity.
If by advocating for you mean pointing out the biological reality of, then okay.
The far right loves Jordan Peterson.
Oh, Richard Spencer said something nice about Peterson? That must mean Peterson is bad.
It must also mean that a single-payer healthcare system would be bad as well, given that Richard Spencer has also advocated for that.
Yes, everything he likes is provably evil.
But Peterson doesn't want alienated young men to become radical fringe right-wingers.
Oh, impressive. 3 minutes into a 5-minute video, and you finally managed to squeeze out one solitary sentence of truth.
In fact, he sees himself as a path away from all that.
Yes, because he is a path away from that.
Many people write me from the right or from the fringes of the radical right, saying precisely that listening to my lectures stopped them from going all the way.
Ah, yes, but his encouraging and thoughtful lectures are nowhere near as effective at stopping the alt-right as finger-wagging dishonest hit pieces so ripe with dishonesty and error that an animator speaking through the mouthpieces of two self-deprecating cartoon characters could destroy it.
Yes, keep up the good work.
Ultimately, Peterson tells young men that if someone else has a problem with your place in the hierarchy, they're either conspiring to destroy Western civilization, or they're just whining.
Citation needed.
He's basically saying that there are those of us who have high IQs,
Believe me, friend, there's no us about it.
or who are very physically strong or whatever, naturally should have access to greater resources, to more control over our communities.
Is this just me, or is it weird that they're interviewing some random dude to explain Jordan Peterson's views to us? Like, is he the resident Jordan Peterson translator? Was it too much work for the main host to misrepresent Jordan Peterson's views on his own? Did he need backup?
He questions the idea that we should live in an egalitarian society.
As the demand for egalitarianism and the eradication of masculinity accelerates, there's going to be a longing in the unconscious for the precise opposite of that, right? The more you scream for equality, the more your unconscious is going to admire dominance.
Well, first of all, egalitarianism has many, many possible meanings, but what Peterson is referring to is the idea that all outcomes should be equal for everyone all the time.
Yes, that everyone should have the exact same income and status, etc.
Which, by the way, is a belief which constitutes literal communism, and one which you're slandering him for challenging.
But what are all these silly conspiracy theorists worried about Marxism for?
Peterson takes the old individualism of conservatives.
Individualism is kind of a bigoted conservative notion.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, gosh.
And makes it attractive to young people by sympathizing with them over how unfair modern social justice seems.
Which is absurd, given how fair this video, for example, has been.
All that stuff is chaos, and Peterson's orderly rules are the antidote. This is why mainstream conservatives love him and have rushed to defend him in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Atlantic. Peterson promises a new path for young men, one that says, all that social justice stuff, that's a plot to destroy what's rightfully yours. Don't let anybody get you down. You've got this. And every man for himself.
I love how he makes this firm, serious face when putting words in someone else's mouth, as though he stumbled across an incriminating statement while arguing with an imaginary friend.
By the way, this goes without saying, but Peterson does not believe it should be every man for himself and has never said so once. In fact, his main thesis is that our identity is the product of our negotiation with society, and we have a responsibility to be what those around us need us to be.
Yes, but that simply because someone asks you to do something doesn't mean that you should. You need to be critical enough to stand up against untruth, such as the untruth that gender is entirely socially constructed with no biological component, the untruth that biological sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation are totally unrelated despite a correlation of greater than 0.9, and the untruth by omission of failing to mention that Jordan Peterson was fighting against legislation which would force him to use pronouns, not simply refusing to use these pronouns himself.
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider donating on Patreon to help me make more. I'm also happy to announce we finally made FreedomToons t-shirts. People donating on Patreon get first dibs on buying them once they go on sale. I should start selling shirts to the general public soon, so I'll keep you posted. Thanks again.